All right. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's CPSA webinar called How to Drive Sales Success with Effective Activity Allocation, hosted by our accredited partner, Tibor Shanto of Renbor Sales Solutions. Please note that you've been placed on mute for the duration of the webinar and that you may ask questions using your Ask Question or Chat function in your GoToWebinar dashboard throughout the webinar. In today's webinar, you will have the ability to understand how to optimize your selling time based on your data, a clear roadmap to improving your skills, and a step-by-step approach to proactively drive and manage your sales success. Our host, Tibor Shanto, is a prospecting and sales execution specialist, specializing in B2B companies that deliver professional development for professional salespeople. He aims to help sales professionals better execute their sales process with a focus on client and revenue acquisition. He has worked with hundreds of companies and thousands of reps, helping them to understand that success in sales is all about execution. Everything else is just talk. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Tibor to start.
Thank you very much, Ruplin. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. And just to echo, I would encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar. We'll be monitoring those. And then again, as we go through the calculator, I would invite you to reach out directly if you'd like to run through it individually for yourself. And we'll be giving you information further to that as we go through. One of the things that I found over the years, having worked with B2B teams, is that sometimes the best way to get some clarity is to actually bring in some analogies or to look at things through different filters. So generally I choose filters that I like, and two things that I've always liked in life. One is when the PowerPoint works. The other is beer. And also I like human creativeness and innovativeness, and I'll explain how these two things come together. But after a while, when you get into beer, you begin to wonder where it came from and how it all came together. And one of the things that you discover quickly is that using the Bavarian beer laws of 1516, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce that word at the top of the screen, there are really just three basic ingredients that go into the production of beer. And in fact, there are those that believe that if you have any ingredients over and above this, then it's not beer and it's impurity. I guess lack of purity. Let's assume that somewhere in there is yeast, and the three that they point to in the Bavarian laws are water, barley, and hops. But as I mentioned, I also like the nature, human nature and human creativity, and I get to appreciate that close up because my son is actually a brewer. And for those of you who are familiar with it, every fall there's a great event in Toronto, and I'm sure it takes place in other cities as well. But we live here in Toronto, the center of the universe. There's an event called Cask Days where they present hundreds and hundreds of different types of brewed beverages, most of which, in fact, very few of which would meet the purity laws of Bavaria. But it is a great testament to what people can do with some basic, simple things to build out on it. But as with anything, at one point, you have to go back to basics because you have to make sure that you are staying true to the purpose of the activity, in this case beer, but in the case of sales it's a little bit different. And if we look at sales, and I took this from a blog post that I read a while ago, these are the 14 most popular methodologies in sales, and some of these you'll recognize by brand, being a challenger sale or spin selling. Others are more types of selling and so on. And again, each of these has some great variabilities. Some of these I like more than others are a little bit dated. But if you look at them all and you strip it down to its core basics, sales purity really comes down to three basic ingredients. And if you can manage these three ingredients in an active way, then you'll have the opportunity to build out on it and actually develop your own style. Now, I want to be clear, these are not meant to limit. When I present this to salespeople on a regular basis, and when I'm doing workshops with companies, people feel that having this kind of basic fundamental focus or having a process attached to it limits their success. And I would encourage you to think differently and think about it through the filter of music. So again, here I go bringing in a different filter. But if you think about it, as far as I know, I'm not a musician, so feel free to correct me. There is roughly about 12 notes that are out there. Yet if you look at it, different musicians do different things with those 12 notes. And if you think about Charlie Parker as an example, or if you think about Jimi Hendrix, everybody always wondered and was in awe of their ability to improvise and really reflect their personality and their style through their music. But the reality is they played with the same 12 notes that are available to every single musician or want to be musician. And in fact, the secret is, and I would suggest salespeople can learn a lot from Charlie Parker, because everybody looked at the bird and said, wow, what a great improviser. And they would go to the clubs at night to take in his great performance. But very few were aware that for 5 or 6 hours in the afternoon, he would practice those improvisations. So again, as we go through this presentation, think about this as being core fundamentals and basics that you can build on, not a limitation on your individual ability and your individual view. And certainly things are going to be dictated by your market and by your customers. But again, bringing it to a different level, even Michael Jordan said that if you take your eyes off the fundamentals, that's when you run the biggest risk of going astray or not achieving your goal. And in our case, our goal is obviously quotas. So I'd like you to consider the number 1760 for a couple of minutes. And if you think about it, 1760 is the number of hours that we traditionally in sales call face time. Simple math, 220 days, 8 hours a day. That's basically when our customers are willing to see us. I know that some are willing to stretch beyond that, but if you think about it, 1760 hours is a good way to look at your opportunity on an annual basis. Now, if you think about it a different way, what I'd like you to do is think about $1,760 and think about your quota as being 1,700, being the return that your company is looking on that 1,760 hours that are available, or $1,760. And I think it's important that people begin to think about time as being something that's not fluid and something that's a bit more solid. If you think about it, we say silly things like time flies when you're having fun or time stands still. And we talk about notions, and I hope that I don't offend anybody, but I'll ask the question and you can answer. Clearly holding hands up is not effective, but maybe you can put in the chat box and I'll give it a second. Has anybody here or listening taken a time management program? And I'll give it just a sec to see if we get any responses. So I apologize to anybody who answered yes to that question, because I think that time management is one of the silliest concepts ever thrust on salespeople. And I don't know who threw it on us, because if you think about time, it's already managed in probably the most universal way. You have 60 minutes to an hour, you have 24 hours to a day, 7 days to a week, 52 weeks to a year, and everybody can agree on that regardless of where they are in the political spectrum. So what I'd like you to think about time is not so much how you can manage it, but what you can allocate it to and the time within which you can then manage your activities. So again, the thing that you can do mostly with time is you can allocate it. And again, I can't see your hands, but I'm assuming that 1 or 2 people continuing this notion of how we use time, how we spend time, how we squander time. Has anybody out there had the pleasure of dealing with a financial manager or a wealth manager in order to manage their assets? One of the first things that you find when you talk to them is they begin to talk to you about what's important to you. What are your aspirations? What age are you? What's your profile? Do you have kids who are going to go to university? Are you looking to invest in a house? Are you planning for retirement? So your basic profile is built out. And what they begin to look at is what are some of the assets that you'd be best invested in order to get the return that you're looking for. So if you're looking to a wealth manager and you'd like an annual return of 10%, so you can retire in comfort when retirement age comes, think about similar concept when it comes to your quota. Your company gives you 1,760 hours within which to achieve a return, and that return is your quota. So just like a wealth manager would look and say, where should I invest this individual's money in order to ensure that they achieve their goals? In this case, let's use the example of retirement. They're going to look at your profile and they're going to decide how much of that money they're going to put into equities, how much they're going to leave in cash, how much they're going to put into fixed income, derivatives, what other, if you're exotic, you can go beat Bitcoin. But they're going to make some decisions as to where they're going to put your money and which percentages they're going to allocate to that. And I think we need to do the same when it comes to sales. And I'd like you to take a second. I'm going to start you off, but I'm going to assume that if you're in B2B sales, then you're going to have to, over the course of a cycle, and let's, for the sake of example, pretend that your cycle is 90 days or 3 months. So over the course of a cycle, you're going to have to do some prospecting within those 3 months. Once you've prospected a particular company or individual, you're going to have to spend time selling them, presenting demos, proposing, everything that goes into that time between the time that you initially engage with them and the time that they sign to become your customer. Once they become your customer, you're going to have to manage that account because there's always another salesperson ready to go after your account. So you're going to have to make sure that you're satisfying their needs. And that's not just an individual activity. I would say that that's an organization-wide activity. And then under admin, let's use that as a sort of bucket for all important things that are not customer facing. So whether that's, product training, sales training, whatever other key activity that you would have to participate in throughout the course of this 90-day cycle that isn't customer facing. And then I put prep and research at the bottom because that sort of stretches across all the other categories. So you're gonna have to do some prep and research for prospecting, certainly when you're selling the individuals, and then clearly when you're managing the account. So what I'd like for you to do for a sec is just think about it for a minute as to whether there are in your particular sale, so not sales in general, but in your particular sale, are there any other key activities that you have to do during those 1,760 hours in order for you to be able to deliver against quota? So as an example, I have to train contracts that I sell. So if I sell a company, I now have to allocate time to training. So I would have to have another category over there. I also do a lot of speaking and writing, so I have to allocate time to that as well. So I'd like you to take for a second, some of you might be involved in implementation, some of you might be involved in other things. So write down on paper in front of you any categories that I may have missed that pertain to your particular sale. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. And we can take questions in the meantime if there are any. Not everybody at once, please. So what I'd like you to do next is, in addition to these categories and any other ones that you've captured below, what I'd like you to think about is, again, over the course of that cycle. So I don't want you to think about on a daily basis or weekly basis, but over the course of that 90-day cycle or whatever your particular cycle is, but let's use 90 days for this morning's webinar, what percentage of your time would you have to allocate to each of these activities? And again, this will differ for different people based on the product you sell, based on your capabilities. I have a friend in DC who does exactly what I do, but he doesn't like prospecting, so he has to spend more time on it because it's something that requires more of his effort, more of his time. Where he's probably a better sales guy than me, so he spends less percentage of his time doing the selling bit. So I'd like you to take a second and put down over the course of 90 days, what percentage of your time would go to these categories that you're seeing on the screen, plus ones that you wrote down in particular for yourself. And as a reminder, you can't go over 100%. You can't be that hockey player between periods who says he's going to give it 110%. So I'd like you to take a second and fill out the percentages that you feel pertain to your success. Not what you're doing now, but what you should be doing in order to exceed quota year in and year out. I'll give you a second to do that. So I will tell you that my experience with thousands of salespeople used to sound impressive. Now it just makes me sound old. But anyway, having done this with thousands of salespeople, there are a couple of basic categories that most of us don't include in this calculation. And the problem with that is that these activities will have to be executed. And if we're not allocating time for them in advance, then what we're going to end up doing is taking time away from something else that's important, and that just begins to unravel the tapestry a lot sooner than it should. So one of the things that we found over the years that people don't allocate time to is what I call tango time, or time to really get ready for what they're about to do. So again, none of us like prospecting. I don't like it any more than the next person. I've just made the connection between making cold calls and my kids eating, and my kids have this thing about eating every day. So in order to be effective at prospecting for an hour or 90 minutes, I need to prepare for that. I need to get my lists ready. I need to have a plan. What am I going to say? Who am I going to talk to? This involves things like clustering, so I don't have to recreate the message on each call. I don't have to recreate the voicemail and so forth and so on. But this should be done on a daily basis or a regular basis. You can't just sit there and do what a lot of organizations and salespeople do, which is create one big plan for the beginning of the year, and then they don't revisit it till the end of the year. So whatever percentage of time that it takes, if you looked at mine, I dedicate about 5% of this getting ready for the activity that's in front of me, as opposed to the big picture plan that we might do at the beginning of the year or the beginning of a quarter. The other thing that people don't allocate time to is firefighting, and that's not regular account management. So we're not talking about when one of your customers calls you up and asks you for an updated invoice, or they may not have gotten an invoice or whatever the case is, or asking you for a delivery time and so on. And even though there's a slight irritation in their voice and their attitude, we're not really talking about fires. What we're talking about is that there's a meteor coming where your customers do their production and, more importantly, write those checks that make up your commissions, and you're the only superhero on the planet that can go and save them, which means whenever it comes in, you have to then stop whatever it is that you're doing and go and act to that. So that's what I mean by firefighting. And by the way, there's a lot of salespeople out there who actually look for fires to avoid certain activities. And generally the activity they're trying to avoid when they're looking to create these fires is prospecting. So again, we're talking about real events where a customer requires your assistance and you have no choice about it. In my world, I tell salespeople that they can call me at any time as long as they're a customer. If they need help going into a meeting or they want to plan for a meeting or whatever the case might be, I have no way of predicting when these calls are going to come in, but I know that they're going to come in, which means I have to allocate time in advance for them, because if I don't, then my problem is going to be that a call is going to come in and I'm going to have to take time away from something else, and usually what it's taken away from is prospecting. So one of the things that I would suggest that you do is really actively manage your calendar where you do the allocation. So you'll notice that I do my prospecting in the morning. That doesn't mean that it's the best time. It's the right time for me in the business that I do, because the audience that I'm trying to reach is most reachable early in the morning or late in the afternoon. For other people that I know, the best time to make calls is 11:30 in the morning. So again, this is a template or a suggestion. It's not definitive. But you'll notice a couple of things that allow me to maximize my time in a couple of ways. So I do have to remind myself to smile and dial when I do prospecting. But you'll notice several times through the day, there is time allocated to voicemail and email. And unfortunately, we live in an age when we're slaves to voicemail and email. And the real challenge is that when you go in and check your email, and even though you're telling yourself, I'm just going to take a quick peek, it really kills your production. And there's an article out there on Yahoo, and it's going to sound funny, but you know, if you check your email in the middle of activity, so let's say you're prospecting, you're writing a proposal or doing something that's important, and you decide to check your email, it's going to take you about 7 to 11 minutes to get back to the level of activity that you were at before that that self-chosen interruption of going to email. And you know, I've read stats, and you can again check this on, I think there was a Yahoo Finance article where basically it lowers your intelligence the same level, or your IQ the same level as smoking a joint. So again, think about when you check your email. Secondly, people don't have the expectation that they're going to get instant answers. I've seen several surveys that suggest that if you respond to customers within a 2-hour window, 120 minutes, you know, so they leave you a voicemail at 9:30 in the morning asking about an updated invoice. If you respond to them within 2 hours, they'll consider you to be customer responsive. So I'd like you to start feeling comfortable about allocating full hours to specific activities, whether that be prospecting, writing proposals, or whatever it is that's important for your success. And again, I'm willing to make you the same offer that I make every customer, that if there is an incoming voicemail or email, it will be in your inbox. And if it's not in your inbox an hour later or your next allocated time to check it, I will give you $100. But think about it. Most people are addicted to their email. But if you were in a most important meeting, let's say you've worked on this deal now for about 3 months, and this was the time that you were going to get a signature, you wouldn't be checking your voicemail, you wouldn't be answering your phone, and you wouldn't be checking your email in the middle of that meeting. Why would you do it in another high value activity? So I'd like you to start feeling comfortable with allocating time for your voicemail and email, and then only going to it at that time. So I know that there's somebody out there thinking, yeah, but what about when I'm waiting for a big important response to a proposal or whatever the case might be? If you have to, an emphasis on the if here, you can still check the subject line to see whether that person that you're looking for that email from has written you or not. You don't have to go into the actual email, because once you go into the email, you open any one of those emails and it just sucks you in like a vacuum, because it's a really reactionary thing. And the sad part is I've seen salespeople look at emails and actually respond to them where they were number 22 on the CC line. So there's absolutely no value to their activity, and they could have been using or investing their time elsewhere. You'll also notice that at 1 o'clock, I have time set aside for shipping, handling, inventory, and turnover. Do the acronym. When it hits the fan, I'm ready. So those are those firefighting times. Now, again, I have salespeople regularly ask me, well, what do I do if the emergency doesn't come in? So the expectation is not that you're sitting there at your desk with your catcher's mitt waiting for the emergency. You can use that time for other high value activities, because you know at one point that piper is going to come and you're going to have to pay it. So if there's not anything happening at 1 o'clock, I can pick up the phone, prospect, get ahead of the game, because that call might come in tomorrow afternoon. But again, you have to get ahead of it. If you know it's coming at you, maybe a half hour is too long, maybe 10 minutes is too short, keep track of it, figure it out, and over time you'll be able to assess what you need for each type of activity. And again, keep in mind that there are two types of selling time. There's the 1,760 hours of what we call prime time, and then there is the rest of the day that's available to you that we call discretionary time. And the idea here is not that the activity is discretionary, but the time that you choose to do it is discretionary. So I could write a proposal at 2 in the afternoon, but chances are I'm not visiting or calling a customer. But I can write that same proposal at 5:30 in the afternoon, and it'll be just as effective, but I will have invested or used my time more effectively at 2 in the afternoon. The other thing that I'd like to sort of put the kibosh to is this notion of multitasking, because it's just an opportunity to not get a whole bunch of things done at once. Now, I understand that multitasking is something that we all have to do, but we don't do it very well. We're not built to multitask as a species. So one of the reasons that you want to block off your time, allocate time, and then manage your activities within that time is so you can limit the need to multitask, because we tend to multitask when we're up against a deadline and we have to get a whole bunch of things done. But if you set it up in advance and you got those things done going along and you stuck to your plan and you felt comfortable with your plan, you would minimize the need to multitask and you would actually improve your productivity. So contrary to what people might tell you, people who multitask are just fooling themselves. And all this obviously leads to your personal metrics. So if you think about the fact that for one sale, you will need 2 real proposals, not spaghetti proposals, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. In order to get 1 real proposal, you need to have 2 viable prospects. And in order to get 1 viable prospect, you will need to go out and meet with 2 people for the first time. So if your goal for the month is 3 sales, you're going to have to come up with 6 proposals. You're going to have to be interacting with 12 real prospects. And to do that, you're going to have to set 24 appointments for the month. To do all that, the cost of entry is time. So what I'd like to do is share with you a calculator that we use with our customers to achieve a whole bunch of things, to help you with the things that we've talked about at this point, but more importantly, to help individual reps, managers, and organizations to come up with an ongoing improvement plan that will help them constantly squeeze more out of the 24 hours that we all get, because the one thing that's guaranteed is next year our quota will go up, but they won't give us any more time with which to achieve that quota. So before we jump into the calculator, and I'm going to share 2 versions of it with you, are there any questions at this point? Are there any answers? Okay.
We have a couple of questions regarding the recording of this webinar. For those of you asking, yes, you will receive a copy of the recording. We will have to edit that and get it back to you probably by end of week this week.
Okay, those were questions?
No more questions yet, Tibor.
Okay. So the activity calculator is fairly simple, and the interesting thing about it is that it forces people to look at their numbers in a way that a lot of salespeople don't. And what's interesting is, whether I'm training in the States or whether I'm training up here, let's use up here. I love asking salespeople, if they follow hockey, and most of the room puts up their hands, and then, I'll pick on a friendly face and I'll ask them who their favorite player is, and they'll tell me who their favorite player is. And then I'll ask them what's their plus minus, and they'll be able to tell me their exact plus minus, and even whether that's an improvement or a decline over last year. But when I ask them for their own numbers, there's this silence because they don't know. And I often wonder why it is that salespeople invest more in a bet on a hockey game than they do in their own career. So the activity calculator is based on your numbers. And I know that some people think that sales is not a numbers game. I personally think that it is. So let's do a simple thing. So let's say your target is $1.5 million. And let's say that your average deal size is $97,000. So these are the questions that salespeople find difficult to answer at times. When I say to them, what is your proposal to close ratio or percentage? So the simplest way to look at it is for every 10 real proposals that you submit, how many get accepted? So let's say 4 out of 10 get accepted, and it's 40%. So the next question that I asked them is that for every 10 customers that agree to start a discovery process with you, so they make no promise, they say, Tibor, I like what you're saying, tell me some more, and then we'll make further decisions. So for every 10 people that initiate a discovery process with you, how many will actually go to the point where they take a proposal from you? And again, let's say 4 out of 10, 40%. And then for every 10 initial meetings, and these don't have to be face-to-face meetings, they could be web meetings, they could be telephone meetings, whatever the case might be, how many people actually move into discovery with you? So again, you go and meet with them for the first time, virtually or face-to-face, and they say, you know what, I like what you're saying, let's talk some more, no promises, but I'm willing to continue this process with you. Let's say 60% of the first engagements that you go to actually turn into something viable. So when we hit the calculate button, what you'll see is that, again, your monthly target, straight up math, is about 125,000. You will need to produce roughly about 1.29 deals on a monthly basis. And to do that, you're going to have 3 real proposals on an ongoing basis. You're going to have 8 active opportunities that are, again, with next steps and all. And if you want to talk about what we consider real discovery opportunities, we can take that offline. And to do that, assuming you have no referrals, no upsells, no whatever, but you have to do everything from a dead cold start, you're going to need to initiate 13 meetings or on a monthly basis, or again, roughly about 3 meetings a week. Now, for some people that might be straight up, for some people that might be difficult, but again, a lot of people want to get more out of their time. So there's several ways that we begin to work with salespeople and with managers. So from a salesperson's point of view, they might want to change or increase the amount of money that they're making or whatever the case might be. And from a manager's point of view, we encourage managers to use this as part of their annual coaching plan with their reps to make sure that those things that reps can improve. So when next year hits, they're starting from a higher platform or a higher level. And one of the easiest ways to create a little bit of flux and to reduce the amount of first meetings that most people need, and again, let's face it, it's the one that people like least, or most people like least, is to focus on the type of customers that you're pursuing. So if your average deal now is roughly 97,000, let's say over the next quarter with your manager, you decided to sit down and begin to profile and target those type of accounts. And when you're engaged with the type of accounts, people who are willing to take upsells and so forth, so you can take this up to $100,000, $3,000 on average. Now notice when you hit calculate, that it reduces the number of sales that you need per month. But if you're really aggressive and you push this up to say $107,000, so a $10,000 increase per average on deal, I'm not a good multitasker. Notice what it does is, again, it takes down the deals per month a little bit more. It also reduces the number of proposals that you have to submit on a monthly basis. It reduces the number of discoveries that you have to have active at any going time, which means that you can be more specific. You have the luxury of actually being more focused on each customer as opposed to running the risk of running through them. And then clearly it brings down the number of appointments that you'll need on a monthly basis. So let's say it takes you about a quarter of working together with your manager to get up to 107,000. There's several ways to do that. Again, type of customer that you profile, how you present things, a range of things that will take you up that 10,000. And let's say the next thing you want to do is just increase the percentage of proposals to close by 5%. And you calculate that, oops. And again, it brings down the number of appointments and number of discoveries that you need to have, giving you the luxury of time to actually do things properly as opposed to rush through them. One simple way to increase your proposal to close ratio is stop submitting what I call spaghetti proposals. And I know it's hard, but these are the kind of proposals that we throw against the wall and we hope that they stick. Most of the time that they don't, most of the time they really don't, and they end up frustrating us. And as a result, things become much more difficult. And I think you get the gist here. So the next thing that we might target is increasing this by 5%. And again, we're talking over the course of a quarter, a few months, not overnight. So there's not a pressure to increase these things by these percentage points overnight. But again, we hit calculate. Notice here the benefit is we're now down to 10 appointments that we need. So if you have some referrals you can draw on and so on, all of a sudden this begins to look manageable. And just for continuity, let's increase this by 5%. And as you can see, it continues to benefit us. So not only does it require that you understand the basic 12 notes that make up the symphony here, but you have a choice as to how you begin to vary them, where you begin to put a focus on, and how you change your game and how your manager can help you get involved. Now, if we look at the Excel version of this, we take it down even further. Let's just pick the same numbers. Let's put this up to 107. So we got the same numbers that we have on the other sheet, but what this helps us do, oops, wrong one. Bear with me. Any questions as I try and hide my mistake? So if we look this on a unit basis, let's just look here because it's not that important. It'll be different for each of you. The other number we get salespeople to track is what effort it takes for them to get an appointment. These happen to be my numbers. So for every 12 people that I dial, I tend to be a phone guy, even though I use email and LinkedIn as well. But on average, for every 12 people that I call, I'll speak to 6 of the right people. So I don't count receptionists and other people, not because they're not nice. Some of my best friends are receptionists, but they can't help me in the decision. And that generally leads to 1 appointment. And that tells me how many calls I need to make on a monthly basis, daily basis, and I can translate that back into how much time I need to allocate for each of these things. And then as my quota changes, I can make adjustments up here. Again, based on my coaching with my manager, I can make adjustments to these things. So I can begin to be in much more control of my day-to-day. I can also make plans as for how I change things to improve my output. And let's face it, like all salespeople, I hope that there's a bit of greed and larceny in you, and you want to make a little bit more money than your quota affords you. This will allow you to actually plan out what you have to change in your current approach to selling in order to achieve the goals that you've set out for yourself. And with that, I'll ask again, are there any questions with respect to either version of the calculator before we go back to the presentation?
A couple of people are asking how to gain access to the calculator. Tibor, maybe you could go over that.
Yeah, so I think that as the presentation is going to be edited and presented on the CPSA site, there'll be links to the web version, and you can always use that. But I think that it is worth the first time as you use the calculator to go through it on your to go through it with me. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to send you the Excel or the web version. I'll walk you through it, and more importantly, talk to you about how you can use it to improve your output. And if you're like me, I'll be perfectly honest and transparent. At heart, I'm the laziest guy you'll ever meet in the world. So I use this calculator to figure out how I can maximize my output with the least amount of input. Other questions?
No other questions.
Oh my God, thought I was going to be interrogated. Again, the one thing I will tell you is once you do the initial calculation, as with anything that's an improvement program or a development program, whether it's in the gym or otherwise, it's going to take time. So the first thing is begin to think about what your numbers are. I know most people don't currently know what their numbers are, some on purpose, some by design. There is no good number or bad number. When I work with salespeople and we use the calculator, they're always worried about whether their number is good or bad. There is no such thing as a good number or bad number. There's just your number and then what you're doing to change that to advantage you. So don't worry about whether your neighbor has one number or a different number. It's a question of where you're starting, where your baseline is, and then where you're going to take it from there. So it's really important. And the other thing that I would emphasize to both frontline salespeople and managers who are taking in the webinar is that it really is the salesperson's number. A motto that I share with my clients is own your own number, and a number of my clients have put that sign up on their walls. If you own your numbers as a salesperson and as manager, you allow salespeople to own their own number, they'll become accountable for it. And the more that they manage their numbers, meaning they manage their activities. So again, they allocate the right time to the activity, which requires knowing what activities drive their success, and then allocating enough time to each of those activities. And then most importantly, and where managers can help most, is actually managing the activity within the time that you allocated. And we've all had examples where we set time aside for, let's say, prospecting, and one of our buddies comes along and asks us if we want to grab a cup of coffee, and we go sure, and then 20 minutes later we've had an enjoyable chat in the coffee, but we haven't done any prospecting. Yet if that same person came along and said to you, instead of a coffee, hey Tibor, I'm going to reach into your pocket and I'm going to take out $2,000 and I'm never going to repay you, we would have an entirely different attitude. So if anything else, what this will force you to do is value your time a little bit more and show you what activities you can do to actually maximize it and make sure that you're driving the sales that you want. This is me in a different format. Up to now, you haven't had to look at my scary face, but again, you can download these various things in various places. And I would invite you to get in touch with me if you have any questions about the calculator or the accredited program, the Proactive Prospecting Program, which has been accredited by the CPSA. And with that, I'll ask one more time, are there any questions?
Please feel free to enter them into the question or chat box, and then we can address them online. Tibor, I think you covered everything.
I don't know about that. I think we're still waiting to find out who's going to win the cup. Okay, well, I thank everybody, and feel free to reach out should you want to take a look at the calculator. And again, let me know whether you prefer the Excel or the web version. But I would suggest first thing is first, figure out what your numbers are so you can make them work for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tibor. And of course, on behalf of the Canadian Professional Sales Association, thank you everyone for joining us, and for Tibor for being our wonderful host. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great sales day.